Some things find you when you've stopped expecting anything at all. I've lived long enough to know that the world doesn't owe us comfort. And most days, it doesn't offer any, but every now and then, something happens on an ordinary road, on an ordinary afternoon, that changes everything. This is a story about a dog who ran until her body gave out, chasing a stranger's car for reasons only she understood. And it's about a woman who had forgotten what it felt like to be needed. I believe you'll understand why I had to tell it. The rearview mirror caught movement. A dog. Running. Margaret Collins pressed the brake, squinting through the dust-filmed glass. A mile now, maybe more. The German Shepherd hadn't stopped, her gait ragged, legs faltering against the frozen asphalt of Route 87. She slowed the truck. The dog sped up. She slowed again. The dog stumbled, caught herself, kept coming. Margaret pulled onto the shoulder, gravel crunching beneath the tires of Richard's old Ford. She stepped out into the November wind. And that's when the dog collapsed. Just dropped. Like her strings had been cut all at once. Ribs showing through matted black and tan fur. Belly swollen tight with pregnancy. And those eyes brown. Exhausted. Looking up at Margaret with something that wasn't hope anymore. It was surrender. Margaret's hand went to her chest without thinking. 68 years old. Standing on a dirt road. Staring down at something the world had thrown away. A scar circled the dog's left ear. Not a cut. A groove worn deep into the flesh. Something too tight. For too long. If this story has found you today, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your hometown in the comments. Sometimes the smallest connections remind us we're not as alone as we think. Margaret lifted the dog into the truck bed. 60 pounds. Maybe. Should have been 80. The bones shifted under the skin like sticks in a burlap sack. The drive home took 20 minutes. George Jones on the radio, singing about doors that never close. Richard used to hum along to this one, fingers tapping the steering wheel. Margaret reached for the dial, stopped, left it. In the rearview mirror, the dog lay flat against the truck bed. Head up, watching the road behind them. Not resting. Watching. Like she expected something to follow. The farmhouse appeared around the bend. White clapboard. Wraparound porch. Richard's workshop still padlocked the way she'd left it 2 years ago. Margaret pulled into the gravel drive and cut the engine. Silence. She walked to the back, lowered the tailgate. Come on, that's her then. The dog didn't move. Just those brown eyes, tracking Margaret's hands. Suit yourself. Inside, the kitchen held the day's cold. Margaret filled a bowl with water, cut a chunk from last night's roast, carried both outside, set them 3 feet from the tailgate. Close enough to reach, far enough not to threaten. The dog watched. Didn't move. Margaret went inside. Made coffee in Richard's old percolator. The new machines never tasted right. She stood at the sink eating dinner. 1 pork chop, half a potato. The grocery list on the counter said milk, bread, eggs, enough for 1. 11 p.m. She checked the window. The dog hadn't touched the food, hadn't moved from the truck bed, just lay there, staring into the darkness beyond the porch light. 2 a.m. Margaret woke to wind rattling the shutters, the bedroom cold enough to see her breath. She went to the window. The dog was shaking, not moving, not trying to find shelter, just shaking. Margaret pulled on Richard's old canvas coat. It still held something of him tobacco. Motor oil, the ghost of Old Spice. She grabbed 2 wool blankets from the hall closet and walked outside. The dog's ears flattened, her lips pulled back, showing teeth. But she didn't run. Margaret set the blankets down, 3 feet away. Didn't reach, didn't speak. Just left them there and went back inside. From the kitchen window, She watched. It took an hour. Then the dog crawled off the tailgate, dragged herself onto the blankets, and curled into a tight ball. She never touched the food. Something about the refusal to eat. Even starving made Margaret's stomach turn. She'd seen that before. In the hospital, patients who'd stopped wanting to live. What had they done to this dog? Day 2, the dog wouldn't leave the porch. Margaret set out fresh water, scrambled eggs, leftover chicken. The bowls sat untouched. Flies found them before the dog did. She tried moving closer. The dog pressed herself against the far railing. Body low, eyes never leaving Margaret's hands. Those eyes tracked every movement like Margaret was holding a weapon instead of a food dish. By afternoon, Margaret gave up trying. She sat on the porch steps with her coffee, not looking at the dog, just sat there, watching the fence line, the bare trees, the gray Montana sky pressing down. Richard would have had you eating by now. Her voice sounded strange in the silence. Too loud. Man could gentle anything. Horses, dogs, my mother. She sipped her coffee. I was always the practical one. He was the soft touch. Behind her, the dog's ear twitched. Margaret kept talking. About nothing. About the weather turning. About the leak in the barn roof she'd been ignoring. About how the coffee never tasted right anymore, even though she used the same beans, the same percolator, the same water. The dog didn't move. But she stopped pressing against the railing. Day 3, same routine, coffee on the steps, words into the air, the dog watching from 6 feet away instead of 10. That night, temperature dropped to 19 degrees. Margaret added a third blanket to the pile. The dog let her get within 4 feet before the growling started. Progress? Day 4, morning frost on the grass, Margaret's breath making clouds. She sat on the bottom step, a piece of roasted chicken in her open palm, arm extended to the side, eyes fixed on the fence post across the yard. Cold seeped through her jeans. Her shoulder started to burn. The chicken grew warm in her grip. Then cold again. She didn't move. 10 minutes. 15. Her fingers went numb. The ache spread up her arm into her neck. She didn't move. 20 minutes. Then warm breath on her knuckles. Whiskers brushing skin. The chicken disappeared. Margaret kept her eyes on the fence post, didn't turn, didn't speak. She heard the dog retreat. But the footsteps stopped closer than before. Maybe 3 feet away. There you go, Margaret said to the fence post. Wasn't so hard? Day 5. Dr. Nathan Hayes pulled his truck into the driveway at 9 a.m. Large animal vet, 20 years in Cedar Falls. He'd treated Richard's horses back when they had horses. He moved slow, talked soft, and didn't ask questions that weren't his business. The dog, Luna. Margaret had started calling her, though she couldn't say why, pressed against Margaret's leg when Hayes approached. First time she'd initiated contact. Margaret felt the trembling through her jeans. Easy, girl. Hayes crouched low, 3 feet away. Let Luna smell his hand. She's letting you close. That's something. She's been through plenty. Hayes examined her on the porch, Margaret holding Luna's head in her lap. The dog whimpered when he probed the swollen belly but held still. He ran a scanner over her shoulder. Beeped once. Microchipped, he said. Reading the number. Registered to a Harold Webb. Address outside of town. He looked up. You know him? No. Hayes wrote down the number, kept examining. He showed Margaret the wear patterns on Luna's teeth from chewing wire cages, calcium deposits along the spine from repeated pregnancies, stretched tissue that would never tighten again. How many litters? 6 minimum, maybe 7. He pressed gently on the abdomen. Luna's legs tensed. 4 pups in there now, maybe 5. Will she make it? Hayes sat back on his heels. He had the face of a man choosing his words. She's malnourished. That leg wound's been infected for weeks, maybe longer. Her body's been running on empty for years. He pulled off his gloves. I'll leave antibiotics, nutrition supplements. She needs food, warmth, rest, no stress. And if she gets all that, then maybe— He stood, knees popping. Maybe she makes it through labor. Maybe the pups survive. A lot of maybes. Margaret! Luna's head was heavy in Margaret's lap. Those brown eyes looked up at her, not asking for anything, just looking. I'll do what I can. Hayes nodded. He packed his bag, wrote out instructions, left bottles and syringes on the kitchen counter. At the door, he paused. I have to report this. Suspected abuse case. It goes in a state database. He hesitated. And that microchip registration if this Webb fellow wants his dog back. He's got legal claim. Dogs like this, purebred German shepherds, breeding stock, they're worth money to certain people. What kind of people? Hayes didn't answer. He didn't have to. Margaret looked down at Luna. The scar around her ear, the wound on her leg, the belly full of puppies she might die trying to birth. Then let him come, Margaret said. Hayes left. The house went quiet. Luna's breathing slowed against Margaret's thigh. Outside, a truck engine rumbled somewhere down the road. Getting closer, Margaret's hand tightened on Luna's collar. The truck that pulled into Margaret's driveway 2 days later wasn't Dr. Hayes. Black Dodge Ram, current year model, not a speck of mud on the wheel wells. Chrome gleaming like it had never seen a dirt road. Margaret watched from the kitchen window as a man stepped out. 60, maybe 61. Pressed jeans, fleece vest over a button-down shirt, boots that had never touched a barn floor. He walked toward the house with the kind of stride that said he owned whatever ground he stood on. Luna, lying by the wood stove, went rigid. A sound came from her throat. Not a growl, not a whine. Something Margaret had never heard from a dog before. The knock came. 3 sharp raps. Margaret opened the door halfway. Kept her body in the gap. Mrs. Collins. The smile didn't reach his eyes. Name's Harold Webb. I believe you found my dog. Behind her, Luna's claws scraped the floor. Retreating. Your dog? German shepherd. Female. About 4 years old. Breeding stock. He pulled papers from his vest pocket. Got registration right here. She wandered off my property about 10 days back. Been looking everywhere. She didn't wander. She collapsed on Route 87. Starving. Pregnant. Leg wound gone septic. Dogs get into trouble when they run off. That smile again. Practiced and patient. Like he was explaining something to a child. I'm just glad she's safe. If you'll just step aside. Luna made that sound again. Louder. A keening that rose from somewhere deep in her chest and came out like a scream compressed into a single note. Margaret had heard sounds like that before. In the hospital. From patients who saw their abusers walk into the room. She seems real happy to see you, Margaret said. Webb's smile flickered, just for a second. Dogs get confused. She's been through a lot. I expect she has. He stepped forward. Margaret didn't move. Look, Mrs. Collins, I don't want any trouble. Just came for what's mine. She's pregnant. I'm aware. When's she due? Few weeks, I'd guess. And after she has the pups? Then what? Webb's eyes changed. The smile stayed fixed, but something behind it went flat. Cold, like watching a door close. That's my business. I expect it is. They stood there, Margaret's hand on the doorframe, knuckles white, Webb's weight shifting forward onto his toes. Behind them both, Luna's breathing came fast and shallow, hyperventilating. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside." "Ma'am." "No." "Excuse me." "I said no. Get off my property." "That dog is worth $3,000. She's registered breeding stock. And I have every legal right." "I don't care about your legal rights. She's not going anywhere." Webb's jaw worked. The smile finally dropped. What was underneath it made Margaret's stomach clench. "This isn't over." He folded the papers, tucked them back in his vest. "I know people in this county. Mrs. Collins, the sheriff and I play poker every other Thursday. Judge Mercer's been to my place for dinner. You think you're helping that dog?" He leaned closer, close enough that Margaret could smell his cologne, something expensive and sharp. "You're making a mistake you can't afford." "Wouldn't be my first." He held her gaze for 3 seconds. 4. Then he turned and walked back to his truck. The door slammed. The engine roared. Gravel sprayed across the yard as he reversed out. Tires spinning. Margaret closed the door. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the wood until the trembling stopped. She should call a lawyer. The thought came and went. She couldn't afford a lawyer, could barely afford the vet bills piling up on the counter. Behind her, movement, soft footsteps on the hardwood. Luna approached, slowly, body low, tail tucked. She stopped at Margaret's feet, looked up at her face, then pressed her head against Margaret's thigh. First time the dog had come to her, Margaret's hand found Luna's ear, the scarred one. She traced the groove worn into the flesh something too tight, for too long, and felt the dog lean into her touch. "I know," Margaret said quietly. "I know." She went to the phone, dialed the first number from memory. "Nathan, it's Margaret Collins, that man you warned me about. He just showed up at my door." Hayes listened, asked questions, told her what he knew, rumors mostly. Nothing proven. Harold Webb ran a breeding operation outside of town, sold purebred puppies online, shipped them across the country. Some people said the dogs lived in cages their whole lives. Some people said the ones that couldn't breed anymore just disappeared. Has anyone reported him? People have tried. I've treated dogs from his place before word gets around among vets, but nothing ever sticks. He's got friends. Margaret? The kind that matter in a county this small. She hung up, dialed again. "Deputy Garrett. This is Margaret Collins, out on Miller Road. I need to report something. A man named Harold Webb just came to my property, making threats." Garrett took the details, promised to come by in the morning, told her to lock her doors. Margaret hung up and looked at Luna. The dog hadn't moved from her spot by the stove, but she wasn't lying down anymore. She was sitting upright, ears forward, watching the door, waiting, outside. The wind picked up. Somewhere down the valley, an engine rumbled. Luna's head turned toward the sound. Margaret walked to the hall closet, pushed past winter coats and old boots, found what she was looking for in the back corner, wrapped in oilcloth. Richard's shotgun. She'd run it once last summer, just to make sure it still worked. Richard always said, "Test your equipment." She didn't load it, just set it by the back door, within reach. The phone rang at 9 p.m. Unknown number. Margaret let the answering machine pick up. No message, just breathing. Then a click. Deputy Tom Garrett arrived the next morning in a county cruiser that needed new shocks. Margaret watched him climb out, adjust his belt, and walk toward the porch with the slow gait of a man who didn't want to deliver the news he was carrying. Luna stayed inside. Margaret had learned that much any uniform, any stranger. and the dog retreated to the darkest corner of the house. "Morning. Margaret." "Tom." She didn't offer coffee. Something in his face told her this wasn't that kind of visit. He stood on the bottom step, hat in his hands. "Webb filed a formal complaint this morning. Says you're holding his property." "Property?" "That's what the law calls her." Garrett looked down at his boots. "I put in for a 14-day hold. Standard procedure in disputed ownership cases. Gives you time to gather evidence of mistreatment. And if I can't prove it, then legally, she's his—" Margaret's jaw tightened. Through the screen door, she could see Luna's shadow in the hallway, watching. "What kind of evidence? Vet records? Photos? Anything that shows she was abused or neglected before you found her?" Garrett put his hat back on. "I believe you. Margaret, I've known Harold Webb for 15 years, and I wouldn't trust him to watch my truck, let alone a living creature. But believing isn't evidence. I need something a court will accept. The court. If he pushes this, and he will, it goes before a judge. Probably Mercer." Garrett paused. "Webb and Mercer go way back. You should be prepared for that. Anyone else ever complain about him about the dogs?" Garrett's face shifted. "There have been rumors. A few calls over the years. Nothing that stuck." He met her eyes. "People get scared. Margaret, Webb's got reach in this county." After he left, Margaret sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. She wrote down everything the day she found Luna. The condition she was in, Dr. Hayes' examination, Webb's visit, the threat. It didn't look like much. A starving dog. A scar. A man's word against hers. She was still staring at the list when a knock came at the back door. Walter Hendricks stood on her porch, holding a 40-pound bag of dog food and a heat lamp still in the box, 72 years old, face like weathered oak, wearing the same Carhartt jacket he'd worn for 2 decades. He'd been Richard's friend before he was Margaret's neighbor. After the funeral, he'd stopped coming around. She'd stopped expecting him to. "Heard you got some trouble. News travels. Small town." He set the supplies down. "Jean used to say dogs know things about people. If that dog's scared of that man, there's a reason." He turned to leave. "Walter." He stopped. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." The days settled into rhythm. Walter appeared each morning around 8. Never knocked on the front door anymore. Just showed up in the backyard, working on something. First it was a whelping box, built from scrap lumber in Margaret's garage. Then it was the garage itself clearing space, running an extension cord, setting up the heat lamp. He didn't talk much, neither did she. But the silence wasn't empty. It was the kind of quiet that happens between people who don't need words to fill the space. "You know anybody at the Tribune?" Margaret asked one afternoon, watching him sand the edges of the whelping box. "Might." He didn't look up. "Worked on their printing press for 20 years, still got some friends over there." "Might need that. Later. Figured you might." December 8th. The phone rang during supper. Margaret checked the number on the machine. Sarah. She let it ring 3 times before picking up. "Mom, just checking in." "I'm fine." "Mrs. Patterson said you have a dog now. A stray." Margaret's hand tightened on the receiver. "Mrs. Patterson should mind her own business." "Mom, is everything okay? You sound different." "I'm busy." "Busy with what, Mom? You're retired. You live alone. What could you possibly— I'm taking care of something." "Sarah? Something that matters." Silence on the line. Then that sigh, the same sigh Richard used to make when Margaret was being stubborn about something. "Mom, you can't just take someone's dog. If this person has paperwork, this person kept her in a wire cage and bred her until her body gave out. This person dumped her on a back road when she wasn't useful anymore. That's terrible. But legally, I know what's legal. Sarah, I'm not senile." "I didn't say—" I have to go. Luna needs her medication. You named it. Margaret hung up. She sat at the kitchen table, hands still on the receiver. Luna came and lay at her feet, her belly pressing warm against Margaret's ankle. You and me both, Margaret said quietly. Nobody wants us either. December 12th. 14-day hold, halfway done. Luna's coat had started to regain its shine. The wound on her leg was closing, pink and healing around the edges. She followed Margaret from room to room, now not anxious, not clingy, just present, watching, learning the rhythms of the house. Margaret caught herself talking to the dog constantly about the weather, about what to make for dinner, about Richard. Sometimes, when the silence got too heavy, Luna never answered, but her ears moved, tracking the words, listening like they mattered. December 14th. Morning. Margaret was filling Luna's food bowl, same as always. When she heard it, thump, thump, thump. She looked down. Luna sat there, tail sweeping the floor, eyes bright. Just for a moment. Then she stopped. Like she'd surprised herself with the motion, Margaret pretended not to notice, went back to pouring kibble. But her chest did something strange, a pressure from the inside. Pushing against her ribs, maybe it was the pregnancy. Maybe desperate creatures knew when to let their guard down. Maybe trust came faster when you had no choice left but to give it. Or maybe Luna just recognized another soul who'd been waiting alone for too long. December 15th, end of the 14-day hold. Garrett called that morning. Webb's lawyer filed a motion, hearing set for December 22nd, 9 a.m. County Courthouse, Judge Mercer presiding. Mercer, you said they were friends. I said you should be prepared. Pause. Bring everything you've got. Margaret. Photos. Records. Anything. And maybe think about getting yourself a lawyer. I can't afford a lawyer. Tom. There's legal aid in Billings. I can get you the number. She wrote it down. Called that afternoon. Got a voicemail. Left a message that sounded thin and desperate even to her own ears. No one called back. December 18th. 4 days until the hearing. Dr. Hayes came by to check on Luna. His pronouncement healthy. Healing. Pups developing normally. Due date sometime between Christmas and New Year's. She's a different dog, he said, watching Luna accept a treat from Margaret's hand without flinching. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Just feeding her. Keeping her warm. It's more than that. He packed his bag, looked at Luna, then at Margaret. Dogs that have been through what she's been through, most of them never trust again. Not really. He paused just at the door. She trusts you. After he left, Margaret sat on the floor beside the whelping box. Luna's head was heavy in her lap. She scratched behind the scarred ear, felt the dog lean into her touch. We've got 4 days, she said. 4 days to figure out how to keep you. Luna's eyes drifted closed. Her breathing slowed. Outside, the sky was darkening. Weather report on the radio said snow coming. Big storm. Temperatures dropping below 0. Margaret's legal pad sat on the kitchen counter, covered in notes. Evidence. Arguments. None of it felt like enough. The answering machine blinked. One new message from earlier, while she'd been in the garage with Walter. She pressed play. No voice, just breathing. Then Harold Webb's tone. Smooth as oil, hearing's just a formality. Mrs. Collins, dog comes home one way or another. Your choice, how easy this gets. Click. Margaret's hand trembled as she pressed delete. Through the window, headlights appeared at the end of her driveway. Sat there, engine running. For 1 minute, 2, 3. Luna was awake now. Ears forward, body tense. She'd heard the engine, too. The headlights reversed and disappeared into the dark. December 22nd was 4 days away. Margaret looked at the shotgun, still leaning by the back door. She wondered if she'd make it that long. December 22nd. County Courthouse. 9 a.m. Margaret wore her navy dress, the one she'd worn to Richard's funeral. Luna stayed home with Walter, watching over her. He lived just across the back field, close enough to walk even in bad weather. The courtroom smelled like floor wax and old paper. Harold Webb sat at the opposite table, lawyer beside him, stack of documents arranged in neat piles. He didn't look at Margaret, didn't need to. The set of his shoulders said everything. Judge Mercer entered, 70 years old, white hair, reading glasses perched on his nose. He shuffled papers for a full minute before speaking. This is a preliminary hearing regarding disputed ownership of one German Shepherd dog, currently in the possession of Mrs. Margaret Collins. He looked up. Mr. Webb, you claim this dog is your property. Webb's lawyer stood, silk tie, city haircut. Your Honor, my client has registration papers, breeding records, and financial documentation proving ownership. The dog, registered as Webb's Luna Star, has a microchip matching my client's records. Margaret's throat tightened. She'd known about the microchip, still felt like a punch. Mrs. Collins, Mercer turned to her. Do you have legal representation? No. Your Honor, I'm representing myself. A flicker crossed the judge's face. Pity, maybe, or something else. Very well. What evidence do you have to support your claim? Margaret stood. Her knees ached. Her hands shook. She spread her documents on the table. Vet records. Photographs. Dr. Hayes' written statement. Your Honor, I found this dog collapsed on Route 87 on November 23rd. She was starving, dehydrated, and had an infected wound on her leg that had gone untreated for weeks. She was pregnant and showed signs of having been bred repeatedly over several years. She held up the photos. These are the conditions I found her in. This is what Mr. Webb calls property. Webb's lawyer objected. The condition of the dog when found doesn't negate my client's legal ownership. Dogs run away. They get into trouble. That's not evidence of abuse. She didn't run away. Margaret kept her voice steady. She was dumped, left on a back road to die because she wasn't useful anymore. Speculation. Your Honor. Mercer held up his hand. Mrs. Collins, do you have any direct evidence that Mr. Webb mistreated this animal? Witnesses' documentation. Margaret's chest tightened. I have the dog herself. I have her scars. I have the way she screams when she hears his voice. That's interpretation, not evidence. The hearing lasted 2 hours. Webb's lawyer produced document after document, purchase records, breeding certificates, vaccination histories, all neat, all official. Margaret had photographs of a starving dog and her own word. When Mercer finally spoke, his voice was tired. I can't make a ruling today. The evidence of ownership is clear, but the allegations of mistreatment are serious enough to warrant further investigation. He removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes. I'm ordering a continuance. Court will reconvene January 5th. Until then, the dog remains in Mrs. Collins' custody pending additional evidence. Webb's lawyer started to rise. That's my ruling. Mercer stood. And, Mr. Webb, if I find out you've gone near that dog or Mrs. Collins' property before then, I'll hold you in contempt. Are we clear? Webb's jaw tightened. Crystal clear, Your Honor. Outside the courthouse, the air bit Margaret's cheeks. She sat in her truck for 10 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, not moving. It wasn't victory, but it was time. 13 days to find evidence that didn't exist. December 24th, Christmas Eve. Snow started falling at noon. Light flakes at first, drifting lazy against the windows. By 4 p.m., the wind picked up. By 6, visibility dropped to 50 feet. By 8, Margaret couldn't see the barn. Luna wouldn't settle. She paced the living room, circling the couch, pawing at the blankets in the whelping box. Circling again, her breathing came fast and shallow every few minutes. She stopped and looked at Margaret, then resumed pacing. Margaret knew the signs. 40 years of nursing. She'd seen them in women 100 times. "It's time, girl." She kept her voice calm, steady. "It's time." She called Walter. No answer. Tried again. The phone just rang. The wind screamed against the windows. Power flickered once, twice. Held. Margaret checked the whelping box heat lamp plugged in. Clean towels stacked. Emergency supplies laid out. Dr. Hayes had left puppy formula just in case. She'd been preparing for 2 weeks, as ready as she'd ever be. Luna circled the box 3 times, then climbed in. Lay down. Her sides heaved with each contraction. 9 p.m. The power went out. Darkness swallowed the house. Luna whimpered in the sudden black. Margaret fumbled for the flashlight on the counter, clicked it on. The beam cut through the dark, found Luna's eyes reflecting back. Generator. In the garage. She pulled on Richard's coat, grabbed the flashlight, and fought her way outside. Snow to her knees, wind like knives. She pushed through to the garage, found the generator in the corner. Red, old, but she'd tested it last summer. Richard always said, "Test your equipment." She checked the fuel, half tank, pulled the cord. Nothing. Pulled again. The engine coughed, sputtered. Died. Her fingers were going numb. Snow melted down her collar, soaking her shirt. Third pull. Fourth. The generator roared to life. She ran the extension cord back to the house. Plugged in the heat lamp. The space heater, orange light filled the living room, pushing back the dark. Luna was straining now, haunches pressed against the back of the whelping box. Head thrown back. Margaret knelt beside her. "Easy, girl. Easy." Luna growled low, warning, protecting what was coming. "I know." Margaret didn't reach for her, just stayed close. "I know, Mama, but you're going to need help." The first puppy came wrong. Breech. Stuck. Luna strained. Nothing moved. She cried out a sound that cut through Margaret's chest like glass. Margaret had delivered breech babies before. In the hospital, with teams of nurses, doctors on call, equipment and monitors and backup plans. Here she had a flashlight and her hands. "Easy now. Let me help." She reached slowly toward Luna's hindquarters. Luna's head whipped around. Teeth bared. Margaret froze. "I'm trying to help your baby. Girl, you've got to let me." Luna's eyes met hers. Wild. Terrified. Then something shifted, some recognition, some surrender, and she turned away. Margaret worked her fingers alongside the puppy. Gentle. Steady. Feeling for the angle. Luna whimpered, but held still. The puppy slid free. Black and tan. Slick with fluid, not moving. Margaret cleared the airway with the corner of a towel, rubbed the tiny body, stimulating circulation. The chest didn't rise. "Come on." She rubbed harder. "Come on. Breathe." 1 second. 5, 10. The puppy coughed, gasped, started crying thin. Reedy, alive. Luna's head came up. She pulled the puppy close with her nose, started licking. Her eyes found Margaret's for just a moment, then she was back to work. Second puppy came fast. 20 minutes later, female, sable-colored. Luna handled it herself, bit through the sack, licked the newborn clean, nudged it toward a nipple. Third at 11 p.m. Male, strong, already rooting before he was fully free. Fourth at midnight. This one was different. Small, too small. Pale where it should be dark. Limp where it should be wriggling. Margaret lifted the tiny body. No movement, no breath. She cleared the airway. Nothing. Rubbed the chest, the back, the legs. Nothing. Held the puppy in her palm, feeling for a heartbeat. They're faint, fluttering, barely there. "Don't you quit," her voice cracked. "Don't you dare quit on me." She opened her shirt, pressed the puppy against her bare chest, skin to skin, the way she'd warmed premature babies in the NICU 30 years ago. Body heat, human contact. Sometimes it was the only thing that worked. Luna watched, panting, exhausted. Margaret held still, felt the tiny heartbeat against her sternum, counted the seconds. 1 minute, 2, the heartbeat strengthened. 3 minutes. The puppy moved, just a twitch, then a squirm, then a cry. Margaret lowered her to Luna's belly, guided her to a nipple. The puppy latched, weak but trying. Headlights swept across the living room window. Margaret's heart seized. She looked at the clock. 3 a.m. But the engine sound was familiar. The truck door that slammed was familiar. Walter's boots on the porch. He came in, covered in snow, face red from cold, stamping ice off his feet. He stopped when he saw the whelping box, 4 puppies nursing. Luna exhausted but alive, licking each one in turn. Margaret kneeling on the floor, shirt still open, covered in sweat and birth fluids. "Merry Christmas," she said. Walter stared. Then he laughed, first time she'd heard that sound in 3 years. "Merry Christmas yourself." They sat in lawn chairs in the living room, watching the puppies sleep. Walter made coffee on the camp stove he'd brought. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, warmth and new life. "She did good," Walter said. "They both did." The smallest puppy, Margaret, was already calling her hope in her head, nursed stronger now. Still small, still fragile, but fighting. Christmas morning. Storm finally passed. World blanketed in white. Margaret slept 2 hours on the couch. Woke to find Luna watching her. The dog's eyes were different now. Something had shifted between them in the night. Some wall had come down. First Christmas in 2 years Margaret hadn't wanted to sleep through. Walter made breakfast on the camp stove: eggs, bacon, toast from bread going stale. Power came back at noon. They ate in the living room near the whelping box, not talking much. December 26th. Letter in the mailbox. Margaret saw it when she went to check the generator fuel. White envelope, no stamp, no postmark. Hand delivered sometime in the night. She opened it standing in the snow. "Mrs. Collins, my client, Mr. Harold Webb, intends to claim all offspring of the dog known as Luna as his legal property. Any attempt to sell, transfer, or otherwise dispose of said offspring will be considered theft and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Additionally, Mr. Webb wishes to inform you that he has obtained statements from 3 witnesses prepared to testify about your history of erratic behavior and animal mistreatment. These statements will be presented at the January 5th hearing. We recommend you reconsider your position. Regards, Patterson and Associates." Margaret read it twice. 3 witnesses, statements about animal mistreatment, all lies, but lies backed by Harold Webb's money. Through the window, she could see Luna in the whelping box, the puppies curled against her belly. 4 lives she'd fought to bring into the world. Webb wasn't just going to take Luna back. He was going to destroy Margaret's reputation to do it. She pulled out the phone, dialed Walter. "That newspaper contact of yours?" she said. "I think it's time to make some noise." December 28th. 2 p.m. Margaret was in the kitchen, bottle-feeding Hope the smallest puppy still needed extra help when she heard the trucks. Not one. Two. She moved to the window. Harold Webb's black Dodge Ram, followed by a white pickup she didn't recognize. Two men climbed out of the second truck, both wearing work gloves, both big enough that Margaret wouldn't reach their shoulders. Webb walked toward the house like he already owned it. Margaret's hands started shaking. Milk dribbled from the bottle onto Hope's muzzle. The puppy mewled. She put Hope back in the whelping box, wiped her hands on her jeans, went to the door. Webb was already on the porch. He didn't knock, just tried the handle. Locked. Mrs. Collins. That voice, smooth and patient, like he was talking to a slow child. Open up. You're not supposed to be here. Judge Mercer said. Judge Mercer isn't here, is he? Webb smiled. I'm not here to argue. I'm here for my dogs. You don't have a court order. I don't need one. He pressed papers against the storm door glass. Registration. Breeding certificates. Those puppies are my legal property from the moment they were born. You're holding stolen goods. Behind her, Luna made that sound, the keening, the compressed scream. She'd heard his voice. They're 3 days old. You take them from their mother now. They'll die. That's my concern, not yours. I won't let you... You won't let me. Webb laughed. Not a real laugh, a sound designed to make her feel small. Mrs. Collins, you're a 68-year-old widow living alone on a dirt road. I've got 2 men with me and the law on my side. What exactly are you going to do? Margaret's throat closed. Her hand found her phone. She dialed 911. There's a man trying to break into my home. 4412 Miller Road. Please hurry. Webb smiled through the glass. Go ahead. By the time they get here, we'll be gone. Along with everything that belongs to me. She heard them circling the house, checking windows, testing the back door. The puppies were crying now. Luna was trying to gather them, pushing them together with her nose, but she couldn't move them all. Still weak from the birth, still recovering. Margaret stood in her kitchen, phone in her hand, and couldn't move. The back door rattled, wood creaked. She should get the shotgun, should call Walter, should do something. She couldn't move. The lock gave way with a crack. Bobby, she could see the name stitched on his jacket, stepped into her kitchen. 30, maybe. He looked at her like she was furniture. Ma'am, you need to step aside. This is my home. And that's Mr. Webb's dog. Jim came in behind him. They moved past her like she wasn't there. Into the living room, toward the whelping box. Luna's scream filled the house. Margaret ran after them. Don't touch her! Don't you dare! Bobby turned, put one hand on her shoulder, pushed, not hard, not violent, just dismissive. The way you'd move a child blocking your path? Margaret's heel caught the edge of the rug. Her balance went. She hit the floor hard. Hip first, pain shooting up through her spine. Her elbow cracked against the hardwood. Her head bounced off the leg of Richard's chair. She lay there on her own floor, in her own house, looking up at a stranger who'd already turned away, like she was nothing. Like 68 years of life meant nothing at all. Jim had Luna by the collar. The dog was fighting twisting, snapping, but she was weak, exhausted. No match for a man twice her weight. Her claws left scratches on the hardwood as he dragged her toward the door. Careful, Webb said from the doorway. He'd stepped over Margaret without looking down. She might still be worth something if she can breed again. Luna's eyes found Margaret, brown eyes, wild with terror, looking back as they dragged her away. Margaret had promised. Without words, without saying it out loud, she'd promised this dog she was safe. And now Luna was being hauled out the door, and Margaret was lying on the floor like a broken thing. and there was nothing she could do. "The puppies," Jim said. Webb glanced at the whelping box, 4 small bodies squirming, crying for warmth that was leaving. "Leave them. They're worthless without the mother's milk." He looked down at Margaret for the first time. "Let them die. Serves the old woman right for wasting my time." The front door slammed. Engine roared. Gravel sprayed. Gone. Margaret lay on the floor. The ceiling had a water stain in the corner. She'd noticed it before, kept meaning to fix it. The puppies were crying. High, thin sounds. Hungry. Getting cold. She didn't move. Another vehicle. 12 minutes later, she'd counted the cracks in the ceiling, traced each one. Deputy Garrett's voice on the porch. Margaret, are you—" He found her on the floor, helped her sit up, asked questions she heard but couldn't answer. "Did they take the dog?" She nodded. "Did they hurt you?" She looked at her hands, at the bruise purpling on her hip, at the rug where she'd fallen. They hadn't hurt her, not really. They just moved her out of the way, like she was nothing, like her whole life, 40 years of nursing, 2 years of surviving without Richard. Everything she'd done and been and tried to be amounted to nothing more than an obstacle between Harold Webb and what he wanted. "I'm documenting this, Margaret, breaking and entering. Intimidation. Assault." Garrett's voice was tight, angry. "Webb just handed me a case. When this goes before the judge, it doesn't matter." "It does matter. This is evidence. He has Luna. He has what he wanted." Her voice sounded dead, flat, someone else's voice. "It's over." Garrett helped her to a chair, made tea she didn't touch, wrote up his report. The puppies kept crying. He left it dark. The house went silent except for those thin, desperate sounds from the whelping box. Margaret sat in Richard's chair. Luna's blanket was still there, still smelling like her. The puppies had crawled onto it, crying for warmth that wasn't coming. She should feed them. She knew this. 4 hours since they'd eaten. They needed formula every 3 hours. They were already weak, already cold. She didn't move. The phone rang. Sarah. Margaret let it go. Rang again. Walter. She let that go too. The puppy's cries got weaker. Richard would have known what to do. Richard would have stopped them. Richard was dead. 2 years dead. And she was still sitting in his chair, wearing his coat, using his coffee cup, pretending that if she kept everything the same, somehow he'd walk back through that door. He wasn't coming back. She couldn't save him, couldn't make her children need her, couldn't protect one broken dog who'd trusted her. What good was she? What was the point of any of it? The smallest puppy, Hope, had stopped crying. Margaret looked at the whelping box. 3 puppies still squirming, 1 lying still. She should check on her, should warm her, should try. She didn't move. Footsteps on the porch. The back door, still broken, scraped open. Walter's voice cut through the dark. "Margaret." She didn't answer. "Margaret." Louder, harder. "Those pups are dying. They'll take them anyway. Maybe, but they're not dead yet." She looked at him, standing in her kitchen, snow on his shoulders, face like stone. "I can't do this. Walter, I can't. Jean used to say the only fight you've lost is the one you quit. I don't care what Jean said." The words came out mean, ugly. Walter didn't flinch. "That's grief talking. I know grief. Lost my wife, lost my boy before that. Some days I wanted to lie down and not get up." He crossed the room, stood over her. "But there are 4 lives in that box who don't care about your grief. They just want to live. Hope still hadn't moved. Margaret pushed herself up. Her hip screamed. Her elbow throbbed. She ignored it. She picked up the smallest puppy. Cold, limp, but they're faint, fluttering a heartbeat. "I'm sorry." Margaret's voice broke. "I'm sorry I left you." Margaret worked through the night. Formula every 2 hours. Warm towels replaced every 30 minutes. Hope pressed against her chest. Skin to skin. Body heat the only thing keeping that small heart beating. By dawn, all 4 puppies were alive. Weak, but alive. Walter left at 6 a.m., came back at 8 with more formula, heating pads, electrolyte solution. He didn't ask how she was doing. The answer was in her hands. Steady now, moving with purpose. "The newspaper," Margaret said, not looking up from the bottle she was preparing. "Call them today." "Already did. Reporter's coming this afternoon." The reporter was young. 25, maybe. Emma Crawford from the Cedar Falls Tribune, notepad in hand, recorder on the kitchen table. She asked questions for 2 hours. Margaret answered every one. The photographs, the vet records, the threatening letters, the break-in, Luna being dragged away while Margaret lay on the floor of her own home. Can I quote you on all of this? Every word. December 31st, the story ran, front page, below the fold, local widow fights to save dog from alleged puppy mill. Margaret's picture next to a file photo of Harold Webb from some business function, smiling in a suit that cost more than her truck. Margaret read it twice, set it down. The Tribune had included a tip line at the bottom, anyone with information about Webb's operation. Now they waited. January 2nd, 9 a.m., the phone rang. "Mrs. Collins, my name's Jake Morrison. I used to work for Harold Webb." Margaret sat down slowly. "I'm listening. I saw the article. The things you said about that dog, the scars, the breeding, the way she screams when she hears his voice." His breath came ragged, like he'd been running, or crying. "I've seen worse. Mrs. Collins, I've seen so much worse." "Why are you calling me?" Silence. Then, "Because I haven't slept right in 2 years. Every time I close my eyes, I see those dogs. The ones that couldn't breed anymore. The ones he—" His voice broke. Margaret waited. "I was 21 when I started there. Needed money for school. Told myself it wasn't that bad." A wet sound. He was crying now. "It was that bad. It was worse. And I didn't say anything because I was scared. Because Webb knows people. Because I thought nobody would believe me over him." "What do you have? Jake?" "Everything." The word came out like confession. "Photos. Dates. Records of dogs that disappeared. Vet bills that were never paid. A ledger showing which puppies were sold sick. Which buyers complained. Which cases got settled with money." He paused. "I copied everything before I quit. Kept it in a box under my bed like evidence of my own sins. Why didn't you come forward before? Because I was a coward. Because I needed the job. Because—" He stopped, started again. "But then I saw that picture of you in the paper, holding that puppy. An old woman, alone, standing up to him when nobody else would. And I thought if she can do it, what's my excuse?" Margaret's hand tightened on the phone. "The hearing's January 5th. Can you be there?" "I'll be there. I'll bring everything. Is it too late, Mrs. Collins, to make it right?" Margaret thought about Luna, about the puppies, about all the dogs she'd never know, the ones that had disappeared into whatever darkness Webb kept hidden. "It's not too late," she said. "It's never too late to do the right thing." January 3rd, more calls. The Tribune tip line had done its work. Patricia Hendricks, no relation to Walter, whose family had bought a puppy from Webb 4 years ago. The dog died within 6 months. Heart defect. The vet said it was genetic. Should have been caught. Webb's lawyer sent us a check and made us sign papers promising not to talk. Her voice was bitter, hard. I felt sick about it ever since. That money felt like blood money. Another call. Rosa Martinez, vet tech who'd worked at a clinic Webb used. She'd refused to falsify health certificates, got fired the same week. I filed a complaint with the state board. Nothing happened. She laughed. But there was no humor in it. Webb plays golf with half the board members. A third call. Montana Animal Rescue Alliance. They tried to investigate Webb 5 years ago. Their complaints got buried. Their funding dried up. 2 board members received anonymous threats. We knew what he was doing. Just couldn't prove it. Couldn't get anyone to listen. Now everyone was talking. And everyone was listening. January 5th, County Courthouse, 9 a.m. Standing room only. Margaret saw faces. She recognized Walter in the back row, Dr. Hayes near the front, Deputy Garrett by the door, Emma Crawford with her notepad. Ready. Harold Webb sat at the defense table, his lawyer beside him. But something had changed. The smugness was gone. Webb's face was tight, jaw clenched, eyes darting around the packed room. Judge Harrison presiding. Not Mercer. Mercer had recused himself after the newspaper story raised questions about his dinners at Webb's house. Jake Morrison testified first, hands shaking, voice steady. He showed his evidence photographs of dogs in wire cages too small to turn around, records of animals that had disappeared, a handwritten ledger documenting sick puppies sold to families across 6 states. The families testified. Patricia Hendricks crying as she described her daughter's face when their puppies stopped breathing. 2 other families with similar stories. Dead dogs, silenced complaints, checks that felt like bribes. Rosa Martinez took the stand. The rescue organization submitted written statements. Dr. Hayes described Luna's condition when Margaret found her, the calcium deposits, the infected wound, the scars. Webb's lawyer objected 17 times. Judge Harrison overruled 16. When Margaret's turn came, she didn't talk about evidence. She talked about Luna. She ran after my truck until she collapsed, pregnant, starving, injured. She ran because she was looking for anyone who wouldn't hurt her. Margaret's voice held steady. She chose to trust me. That means something. The courtroom was silent. Judge Harrison removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes. When he spoke, his voice was tired but firm. Based on the evidence presented, this court finds that the dog known as Luna was abandoned by her legal owner and subsequently rescued by Mrs. Margaret Collins. Ownership is hereby transferred to Mrs. Collins, effective immediately. Margaret didn't move, didn't celebrate. Furthermore, this court is recommending a full investigation into Mr. Webb's breeding operation, including potential charges of animal cruelty, fraud, and operating without proper licensing. Webb's face went white. His lawyer whispered something. Webb shook his head, stood up. For a moment, Margaret thought he might shout, make threats, cause a scene. Instead, he looked at her, just looked. And in his eyes, she saw something she hadn't expected. Fear. He walked out without a word. January 7th, the raid, animal control, state investigators, Deputy Garrett with a warrant he'd been waiting years to serve. Margaret wasn't there. She was home with the puppies, waiting. Walter brought the news at sunset. 23 dogs, 14 in cages so small they couldn't stand up straight, 3 with wounds that had never been treated. He sat down at her kitchen table, looking older than she'd ever seen him. 2 were pregnant. 1 died on the way to the shelter. And Luna. Walter reached into his coat, pulled out a photograph. Luna in a wire cage at the county shelter, eyes dull, ribs showing again. They'd starved her in those 10 days, tried to break what Margaret had built. She's being held as evidence for now, but they said you can see her tomorrow. He slid the photo across the table. Said you can bring her home as soon as the paperwork clears. Margaret looked at the photograph, at those brown eyes she knew so well. I'll do more than visit. Luna came home on January 10th. Margaret drove to the shelter at 8 a.m., signed the release papers, and opened the back door of the truck. Luna climbed in without hesitation. Lay down on the blanket. Margaret had brought the same blanket from the whelping box, still carrying the scent of her puppies. The drive home took 20 minutes. Margaret kept checking the rearview mirror. Luna's head was up this time, watching the road ahead instead of behind. When they pulled into the driveway, the puppies were crying in the house. They'd heard the truck. Margaret opened the back door. Luna jumped down, walked to the porch, waited at the front door. Patient, certain, inside. Margaret led her to the whelping box. 4 puppies, 2 weeks old now, eyes starting to open, squirming toward the sound of their mother's footsteps. Luna froze, sniffed. Then she was in the box, licking each one, counting them with her nose. 1, 2, 3, 4, all present, all alive. She looked up at Margaret. Those brown eyes, clear now, steady, something passed between them that didn't need words. Margaret sat down on the floor beside the box. Her hips still ached from the fall. She didn't care. Welcome home, she said. The weeks passed. January bled into February. 3 families came to meet the puppies. Margaret interviewed each one personally where they lived, how much land they had, whether they'd owned dogs before. She asked questions that made some of them uncomfortable. She didn't apologize for asking. The Hendersons came first. Young couple, wheat farm 20 miles outside town, 500 acres and a house that needed filling with noise. He's strong, Margaret said, handing over the firstborn, the one she'd pulled into the world breach on Christmas Eve. Stubborn, too. Don't let him push you around. The wife laughed. We've got mules. We know stubborn. The Reeves family came next. 3 children under 10. A fenced yard big enough to run in. A mother who'd grown up with German shepherds and knew what she was getting into. She's gentle, Margaret said of the sable female. Patient? She'll let them climb all over her. She paused. But she remembers things. Be kind to her. The youngest child, a girl of 5, wrapped her arms around the puppy's neck. The puppy licked her face. Margaret looked away, blinked hard. Mrs. Patterson was last. The same Mrs. Patterson who'd gossiped to Sarah, who'd spread word around town that Margaret had lost her mind. She'd shown up 3 weeks ago with a check for Luna's vet bills and an apology that Margaret hadn't asked for and didn't need. This one's difficult, Margaret said, handing over the 3rd puppy, the male who'd come out fighting and hadn't stopped. He doesn't trust easy. You'll have to earn it. Mrs. Patterson held the puppy against her chest. I've got time. Nothing but time these days. Margaret understood that. Understood it better than she wanted to. After the last family drove away, she sat in the kitchen with Hope in her lap, the smallest one. The one who'd almost died twice. The one Margaret had held against her bare chest in the dark while the world howled outside. Luna lay at her feet, watching. Just us now, Margaret said. Luna's tail swept the floor. Once, Walter came by every morning. 8 o'clock. Regular as sunrise. He didn't knock anymore, just came in through the back door, poured himself coffee from the percolator, sat at the kitchen table. Some days they talked, about the weather turning toward spring, about the news from Town Webb's trial date set for April. Federal charges added for transporting sick animals across state lines. About Richard sometimes. About Jean. Most days they didn't talk. Just sat there, coffee cooling in their hands, comfortable in the quiet. One evening, Walter fixed the leak in the barn roof. Margaret watched from the kitchen window while she made dinner, pot roast, the way Richard used to like it. Carrots, potatoes, onions slow-cooked until they fell apart. Enough for two. They ate at the table. First time Margaret had set two places since the funeral. "Jean would have liked you," Walter said, pushing back his empty plate. "Richard would have liked you too. He probably would have tried to fix my truck. He would have ruined it. Man was hopeless with engines." Walter laughed. That rusty sound she was getting used to hearing. Margaret laughed too. It surprised her how easy it came now. Mid-January, the phone rang. Sarah's number. Margaret almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Mom, I'm coming to visit." "You don't have to." "I want to." Pause. Breath. "I should have come for Christmas. Should have come when Dad died. Should have come every time you needed me and I found an excuse not to." Sarah's voice cracked. "I was scared. Mom." "Didn't know what to say. Didn't want to see you hurting." Margaret looked out the window. Luna was on the porch. Hope tumbling around her feet. Both of them watching the road. Walter's truck sat in the driveway he'd stayed for lunch, was out back splitting firewood. "I'm not hurting anymore." "Sarah." "I know." Sarah was crying now. "That's why I'm coming." She arrived on a Saturday, drove up from Denver, 12 hours straight. She stood in the driveway looking at the house like she'd never seen it before. Maybe she hadn't. Not like this. Not with dogs on the porch and smoke rising from the chimney and a man's truck parked by the barn. "Mom." Sarah hugged her tight, the way she used to when she was small. "You look different. I look old. You look alive." They walked inside. Sarah met Luna, who sniffed her hand and decided she was acceptable. Met Hope, who decided Sarah's shoelaces were a mortal enemy and attacked accordingly. "She's a terror," Margaret said. "She's perfect." They sat in the living room, talked about things they'd been avoiding for 2 years. Richard, the distance that had grown between them, the phone calls that got shorter every month. "I didn't know what to say to you," Sarah admitted. "After Dad died, you just went quiet. Even when I called, you weren't really there." Margaret nodded. She couldn't argue with that. "I was waiting," she said. "Didn't know what for." "For what?" Margaret looked at Luna, dozing by the fire, at Hope, finally worn out, curled against her mother's side. "Something that needed me, I suppose." Sarah stayed a week. They didn't fix everything, some things take longer than a week. But they started. That was enough. February, first hint of spring. Margaret woke at dawn. Gray light through the curtains. Luna at the foot of the bed. Hope sprawled across Margaret's feet. Too big to be a lapdog, but refusing to admit it. She lay there a moment, listening. The house wasn't silent anymore. Luna's breathing, Hope's soft snores, the creak of old boards settling in the warmth. She got up, made coffee, 2 cups. Walter would be over soon. The kitchen window faced east. Morning light fell across the counter, across the photographs on the refrigerator, Richard and Margaret on their wedding day, Sarah as a baby, a new photo now Luna and her 4 puppies, taken the day after Christmas. Margaret touched the new photograph, paper smooth under her fingertips. Outside, snow was melting, patches of brown earth showing through, birds singing in the bare branches she'd forgotten what that sounded like. Luna appeared in the doorway, looked at Margaret, looked at the door. All right, all right. Margaret pulled on her coat now, bought last month at the feed store and opened the back door. Luna stepped onto the porch. Hope tumbled out behind her, nearly falling down the steps in her hurry. Margaret followed. The air was cold, but soft. Sun coming up over the mountains, painting the snow gold and pink. She sat in the chair on the porch. Richard's chair. Once. Hers now. Luna settled at her feet. Hope found a stick, attacked it. Lost. Attacked again. Walter's truck appeared at the end of the driveway. Margaret watched it come, felt the warmth of the coffee cup in her hands, heard Luna's tail thump against the porch boards. Well, she said to no one, to everyone, I suppose we'd better get on with it. The day began. There is a quiet that settles after a story like this. Not silence exactly, something softer. The kind of stillness that sits in your chest when you have walked alongside someone through their hardest days and watched them find their footing again. Many of us know what it feels like to be set aside. To wonder if we have outlived our usefulness. To sit in rooms that have grown too large, too empty, waiting for a phone that doesn't ring or a door that doesn't open. Some of us have loved without being seen, have given without being thanked, have carried things quietly because there was no one left to tell. And perhaps some of us have found, in the most unexpected places, something that needed us back. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't need a name or a reason you can explain to anyone else. Some things just are tender, unfinished, familiar in ways that require no explanation. You are allowed to let this story rest now, to carry whatever piece of it feels true and leave the rest behind. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying until the end.